Craig Whitlock over at the Washington Post has a bombshell report on the utter failure and lies of multiple administrations with regard to our military action and war in Afghanistan. It really is worth taking the time to read this entire report because it is stunning the way that 3 different administrations have lied to us. So listen, basically, they FOIA'd a report that the government had put together assessing what had happened in Afghanistan. 2,000 pages of interviews and notes. Transcripts of interviews and notes with the key people on the ground, the key leadership. And at every turn, they talked about how this was a failure, how they were goosing the metrics to try to convince the American public that things were going well, when in fact we continue to backslide, continue to backslide, continue to backslide, and that while we went in with this limited mission, right, find bin Laden and punish the Taliban for coddling him, root al-Qaeda out, this limited mission, the mission kept changing. Some people wanted regime change, some wanted to foster democracy, some wanted to rebuild Afghanistan into a developed, rich world nation. All of it is an utter catastrophe that continues to cost lives, treasure, etc.
Over $1 trillion spent in Afghanistan by some accounts. I want to read some choice quotes here, which is one was, it was common at military headquarters in Kabul and at the White House to distort statistics to make it appear the United States was winning the war when that was not the case.
Unbelievable.
And they also discuss how the Obama administration, a person identified as a national security official, said there was constant pressure from the Obama White House and the Pentagon to produce figures to show a troop surge of 2009 was working, despite hard evidence to the contrary. Even when casualty counts and other figures looked bad, quote, the White House and Pentagon would spin them to the point of absurdity, saying that suicide bombings showed that the Taliban was on the run, that the fact that more U.S. troops were dying showed that we were putting pressure on the enemy as opposed to before. 2 administrations, this basically cuts off around 2018, 2 administrations, the same lies, the same, sliding toward where we are right now over what, 17 years in Afghanistan since 9/11 occurred. And nothing has changed. And you have the generals. These are people I covered. I started out covering the Afghan war, who are speaking on the record to this inspector general.
Right.
They never thought their comments would come out.
In the Washington Post.
The generals who lead this are saying, yeah, we had no plan. We had no idea what we were doing.
Listen to this quote from Douglas Lute, a 3-star Army general who served as the White House's Afghan war czar during both the Bush and Obama administrations. He said, "What are we trying to do here? We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking. We were devoid of a fundamental understanding of Afghanistan. We didn't know what we were doing."
Yeah.
That's what the people who were leading this effort were saying privately, thinking these words would never come out. Meanwhile, the public faces, oh, we're making progress, we're building, human rights, we're doing all this great work, we're rebuilding, we're training the police, we're making inroads. And to your point about, we, see these stories about suicide bombings, which you continue to see. This was a sign that the Taliban was desperate, right? That was the spin on it. And what really happens here, it just goes to show, look, start out with this limited mission. You go in, but the minute that the military-industrial complex gets
a lot of money.
one fingerhold on a country, on a place, on an engagement like Afghanistan, you will never get out because people are making so much money, hand over fist in these conflicts. And once that money machine starts, forget about it.
It is a story about money, and it's a story about greed and corruption. And it just goes to show you, they don't care that over 2,000 U.S. troops died in Afghanistan. 20,000 were wounded. I personally know some of these people who were wounded in Afghanistan. And they will tell you the same thing. For what? I had an experience in which a friend of mine, he lost a limb in Afghanistan. And he lost a limb in a district. I had met him, and we were talking about the war at that time. And the place where he had lost his arm had been retaken by the Taliban that day. And he was like, for what, man?
For what? And part of what they lay out in this report as well, in this reporting, is that, we were supposed to be getting a handle on the drug trade there. Afghanistan's long been massive cultivator of poppy for
it's
opium.
Only gone up,
it's only gone up. The corruption of the government, which we've been, propping up, has only gone up. It's a complete klepto state now.
It's a klepto state. They have no legitimacy amongst the people. Half the Taliban's case is we can govern the country better than than these people, which is exactly how they rose to power in the 1990s. And just over and over again, you see over $1 trillion poured into this boondoggle of epic proportions, and nobody can stop it. Obama was elected to office saying, we're going to win the good war and eventually we'll pull out. He surged the troops. It didn't work. Pulled it back slightly. Trump comes in and says, we're going to get the hell out of Afghanistan, ends up putting even more troops. Over and over again, the military basically threatens whoever is the president. They're like, you can't lose. If you do, if you do pull out, every single death is on you. And they just continue to spend trillions and trillions of dollars abroad to the benefit of nobody. The Afghans are not being helped by this.
Right.
The American people are not being helped by this. The only people that are being helped is the military-industrial complex, these defense contractors. They're the #1 people that are benefiting. And, oh, by the way, the klepto state of Afghanistan.
Indeed,
Yeah.
and with still no end.
Yeah, and there's
in
another
sight.
thing I do want to highlight, which is that, when the Pentagon Papers came out, the similar report, right, in the 1970s, American public kind of lost its
Mike
mind.
Gravel.
Right, they were like, wow, the government lied to us. What's so interesting, this is a sign of democratic and institutional decline, is that nobody cares. Because you know why? It just confirms what we all knew. Every single one of us knew we were doing nothing in Afghanistan, but people didn't actually have the power to stop it, even through the democratic vote. And so when a report comes out like this, it just confirms existing suspicion that we're being lied to by our elites and by our government. Just think about how much of a 40-year change that is in our relationship to the state. That's a relationship for disaster.
So much cynicism.
Yeah.
And I think the other problem is that, the elites don't feel the cost of this war. They're not the ones sending their sons and daughters to die over there. And so, at that time in Vietnam, there was a broad swath of the public that was invested in what was happening there. Now it's, it's the poor and working class who overwhelmingly fight these wars. And so the impact is massively hidden from public sight. And that's a part of the story here, too.
Exactly.
All right. We'll have more for you right after this.